Hey, welcome to Film Fanatics, three film geeks discussing movies both new and old. My name is Dan.
My name is Justin.
And I'm Giuseppe.
This week, bestseller Gone Girl comes to the big screen with Ben Affleck at the helm. Bestseller Left Behind gets a film reboot with Nicolas Cage this time, instead of TV star Kirk Cameron. And we also take a look at Love is Strange, starring John Lithgow and Alfred Molina. And our home media moment revenge thriller Blue Ruin. Our triple feature of older films is Looper, my pick for Old Classic Horror Month, The Blair Witch Project, and an Oscar-nominated film from 1940. Inspired by a few of our movies this week, our top five, we'll take a look at our favorite revenge flicks. First up is Gone Girl, which had a huge opening weekend, and Justin's going to tell us about that.
Nick and Amy Dunn, played by Ben Affleck and Rosamund Pike, have lived a life attempting to live up to each other's expectations. Until their 5th anniversary, when Amy disappears and the search to find her begins. Though as more details seem to come to light on Nick's life, a media war ensues to shape Nick's public image and find the truth about Amy's disappearance. Without giving anything away, a chore for this movie, I assure you listeners, Gone Girl is an ugly story based on a book that's almost equally so, which therefore will leave a divisive reaction on audiences. There's largely no one to get behind, and to say this movie only gets more unpleasant as it goes along would be the understatement of the century. So why is this movie easily one of the better movies of this year? Simply put, director David Fincher is a filmmaker who makes ugly look amazing and suspenseful. Granted, not every detail from Gillian Flynn's novel, and also wrote the script, makes it to the silver screen, and the ending does get changed a little bit. The film flows beautifully, and the quick, blunt editing only continues to emphasize this. Affleck and Pike play their characters cold, and it comes out in the most subtle, sometimes disturbing ways imaginable. While some could easily argue Affleck's simply playing a variant on himself, with his traditional wooden nature, this still helps show audiences how even the most minute detail can be shaped and restructured by media gatekeepers. Although it may be probably the most depressing good movie I've seen this year, Gone Girl serves as a great example of what film adaptations need to be, and I give it an A.
Yeah, we talked very recently on this show about how a person can spot a Woody Allen movie within seconds because he's got this style all his own. The same can be said for director Fincher, and he's quickly becoming one of my favorites. Like Allen, Fincher's stamp is aided by his use of music, in recent cases by Oscar winners Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross. It gives all of his movies a dark, ominous presence, which aids whatever dark story he has to tell. Gone Girl is a terrific piece of cinema. Affleck's acting is decent as always, and though I find him a better director than an actor, he gives one of his best performances here. And really the whole ensemble is great. Pike completely steals the show. I've seen her in a handful of movies before, but this is her breakout role without a doubt. And I wouldn't be surprised if a Best Actress nomination is in her future. The rest of the cast gives great performances as well, specifically Carrie Coon as Nick's twin sister, Kim Dickens as the lead detective, and Tyler Perry as Slimy Lawyer. The one miscast I felt was Neil Patrick Harris. He was good in the role, but after 9 years of the slapstick comedy of How I Met Your Mother, I admit I did have a little bit of a hard time taking him so seriously. But the twists and turns of this film will have even the most crack detective fan questioning what they think they know. And I understand many fans of the book don't like the ending. I didn't read it like Justin did. He mentioned the film ending is slightly different, but I definitely see where they're coming from. But I also feel like even though it may not be how we want it to end, it's not necessarily unrealistic. Gone Girl is not Fincher's best film. That is, of course, Seven. Everyone knows that. But it is one of 2014's best, and it gets an A from me as well. Joe?
How can I follow up such fantastic reviews?
Oh, thanks.
Well, I won't. I'll just kind of add my opinions. Really, I have to agree with you guys. I mean, this movie is just fantastic. I mean, Reznor does a great job with the soundtrack. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's just so ominous and powerful. Hey, it's all the right notes, but you'd expect that from him. Just how Fincher's able to utilize the music and the editing and just all his actors perfectly. I don't know how much of an adaptation it is. Are people generally satisfied with it, Justin? You read it.
I thought it was pretty faithful. I mean, stuff gets left out. Things get changed or swept off to the side a little bit, but it's nothing that I thought was a major compromise.
I didn't think so. I do have to agree with you. I mean, the only real negative I thought about it was that the movie is so unpleasant, but it doesn't really mean that it's just not well done, though. The unpleasantness is magnificent. As you said, Justin, I mean, Fincher has a way of turning the ugliness and making it fantastic. But the one thing I found unsatisfying was the ending, because it's not how I wanted it to end. And I felt like that did bug me. But that doesn't really take away from how well put together the story really is. I think it's actually really smart that the author did do the screenplay as well, because it's very close to the truth of the novel.
I think that always helps.
It's just that way there is not that much lost in interpretation between the production of the film and the original source. So it does feel very genuine to me. I thought Affleck, I agree, he didn't give like his best performance, but it was still a very good one for him, I thought.
Yeah, no complaints here.
And Pike, who I'd only seen, I think, in a couple movies. She was a Bond girl once years ago. Really, I didn't really think too much of her, but wow, what a fantastic performance.
Yeah.
For her. She's probably one of the best actresses I've ever seen. Like, just was completely absorbed in this character and so multifaceted. And, I really agree. I thought all the cast rating was pretty good. I thought, Patrick Harris worked fine in his kind of disturbing role, but I do agree that I'm used to seeing him more upbeat roles. I think that's where he naturally fits. But I thought he worked fine. He might have been the weakest link. I actually thought Tyler Perry was really good.
Yeah,
agreed. Actually,
after
really
you
liked
give your
him.
grade, I want to discuss that a little bit.
Because I'll be honest, like the one thing I was wondering about is like we talk about Tyler Perry on the show a lot and how he's just kind of like okay. I mean, I never really thought he was a bad actor, but I haven't really seen too much of him outside of Medea. So this is a pretty sizable role for him, and I was wondering, okay, this movie's pretty good, but when we get to this character, is it going to drag this down? And he just fits so perfectly, and he's so awesome.
He's
and
great.
Just is so interwoven, and he's great. I kind of was sad to see him go. He was just such a great character. Really, with the exception of the fact that the unpleasantness is a little bit disappointing for me personally, I still have to say there's really nothing wrong with this movie. It's very gripping and enjoyable, and I'd highly recommend it. And I give it an A as well.
Nice. So, I mean, I've long maintained that Perry is a lousy writer, not the best director, but I've always found his acting to be pretty good. I think the Medea character is the highlight of any Medea movie, and I think the movie that he did when he took over the Alex Cross character, I thought he did a really good job with that.
I think one thing you could say about him, he does actually have range.
Yeah, so I wanted to get Justin's opinion most on this because he really, really hates Tyler Perry movies, but and you didn't see Alex Cross, right?
I did not, no.
Right. So what did you think of his performance here?
With Tyler Perry's character, I read his role in the book, and I just kept thinking, he's either going to do really, really good with this or completely mess it up. Fortunately, he was up to the task. Much like you mentioned, I have not seen the other out of Medea movies he's been in, like Alex Cross and things like that. But
you've seen him in Star Trek.
Hey,
he was in it. He was in it.
He had a tiny part.
I don't care. He was in it, and he wasn't in drag.
It's still acting.
Counts.
It's still something. It's not Medea.
I won't deny that.
He was pretty good in Star Trek.
Yeah, he was fine.
I agree. In his 2 scenes.
Obviously, I can't speak to his other stuff, but here I thought he really did a good job. He fit the role. He definitely knew how to play it. In a lot of ways, he actually went above and beyond the material in a way.
I'm not surprised.
Do I think he'll get a Best Supporting Actor nomination? Probably not.
All right, well, I didn't say that. That's a little ridiculous. But, no, I mean, for me, it's vindicating that this guy is so good in this movie. Because I've heard that from several people that have seen it. Like, wow, Tyler Perry was really good. Yes, he is. The guy can act. He built an empire on these one-man shows that he does. Yes, part of them are in the Medea world. But, I mean, he does many different characters in them, and I think as an actor, he actually has some good range.
Yeah.
I do have, though, something to say about your review, Justin. You mentioned that there was nobody to get behind. I don't agree with that. I think Nick's sister you can easily get behind. She's just thrown into all of it. And also Gone Girl's parents.
I was referring to like the main cast, but yes, the supporting characters.
The main two, yeah, I agree. You can't get behind either one of them necessarily.
I don't know. I was kind of behind Affleck as the story went along.
As the story goes along, yes.
Originally,
you sort of weave and bob,
Originally, no, but no spoilers. There's a certain point where I'm like, as things start going, I'm like, okay, I'm kind of on Affleck's side personally. But I think people could make a choice.
Yeah, I think there's quite a few people to get behind in the movie.
I thought Tyler Perry, I'd like to see him succeed, honestly.
He's still basically a slimy lawyer,
yeah,
though.
He was pretty slimy.
I don't know. He was willing to take the case without having all the money up front. He couldn't be that slimy.
No, you're right. He was trying to help him out.
He was willing to turn the tide, and that was not a scene that was in the book. He was actually pretty bent on the 100,000.
Well, hey, that's what I'm saying. At least in the movie, he could have been slimier.
Yeah.
Rich lawyer like that wouldn't necessarily have to be like, sorry.
That's true.
He says, we'll work something out. I can live with that.
No, that's true.
I didn't think he was that bad. I thought it was cool that he was like, on board, and it was awesome.
How about the sister, though?
Sister was probably the most believable character, I
Yeah.
thought. She was pretty good.
She was annoying, but I agree with you. Still very believable.
I didn't think she was that annoying.
Yeah, I didn't find her annoying. I think that she and Nick have an entire lifelong history of being twins together, so they may talk on a level that...
They're very personal.
Yeah.
That may not come across right to outsiders, but I mean, I thought within their context that she was not annoying at all. I thought she was believable and fine.
I guess annoying in a sibling kind of way, but...
Annoying for the context of the story, maybe?
Yes, on that we can agree.
All right, well, good A's all around for that one.
Yeah.
Maybe appearing later on in our Best of the Year show. But up next is Left Behind. This may take a different turn than Gone Girl. This is a remake of the classic Christian-themed Kirk Cameron film and based on the popular novel. And in this version, Nicolas Cage is airline pilot Rayford Steele. Joe, I can't make it up.
Let it sink in for a sec.
Wow.
He's a heathen who's cheating on his super Christian wife, played by Leah Thompson, and he also neglects his family, including daughter Chloe, played by Cassie Thompson. While he's up in the air, the rapture happens, and all children and only the most devout of Christians disappear, presumably to heaven, leaving all the rest below. That's as much of the plot as I really want to even talk about, because the movie is, simply put, so much worse than I ever could have imagined. The acting is insanely horrible, the stereotypes beyond offensive, the effects are a joke, and about a third of the plot conceits are ridiculously laughable. I tend to be a defender of Christian films, even if they're not all that great, because partially at least they're serving their intended audience well. Left Behind is another story entirely. Even Christian media outlets have not gotten behind this film. And what does it say that groups that accept duds like The Identical and Son of God are shunning Left Behind? That speaks more about this film than I ever could. Not only is it an F, it is without a doubt the worst film I have seen in the last 2 years. Joe, didn't have time for this one. We told you, you know what? You don't need to see it.
Well, I've seen the Kirk Cameron version.
But you've seen the original, so you already know kind of the basics. Justin, what'd you think of Left Behind?
For as much as I knew how critically despised the original Left Behind film series was, I honestly hoped the reboot would have instilled some degree of trying to make a better product. If this is anything resembling the books or films, my only thought is this. What on earth have we as human beings done to deserve this garbage? Granted, the roles Nicolas Cage has signed on to pay off his endless debt have been abysmal enough, but this takes desperation to entirely new heights. His character, along with the rest of the ensemble for that matter, are one-dimensional, boring, and laughable in their pathetic attempts at acting.
Listen, Rayford Steele's got to get paid, okay? Everybody knows that.
I guess so.
Sounds like a Ludlum character.
Rayford Steele
is the hero of Russia.
Yep.
It's like Jack.
He's like a Bond villain.
Basically.
It sounds like something you'd come up with, like
Mr. Steele.
No, it's like an Alex Cross or something.
Yeah, it is. It's bad.
It's really bad.
The effects and just general storyline are basically incoherent and practically invite audiences to start immediately tearing this movie apart. And I think Dan put it perfectly. Rayford Steele, please pay back your money because this is downright sad at this point, and I give it the latest F for 2014.
Justin, I was going to say, you've given Fs to many a Christian movie. If you gave this anything higher than an F, there were going to be some words. I mean, this was... my number one worst film of 2013 was Getaway, and this so exceeds how awful that film was.
There aren't words to describe how mind-numbing this movie is.
It's so terrible. And Justin and I, there were literally a few times where Justin and I had to keep ourselves from laughing. Because the theater was not empty. We saw it opening day.
Okay.
So, it wasn't full, but there were people there. And I didn't want to be offensive if they were, really into it. But, it's just awful. And Christians really love the first Left Behind film. That's why they made the whole series of them.
I know, they're pretty popular.
So, to answer that question, Justin, the original Left Behind is highly regarded by the fan base.
Yeah, Left Behind, when I saw it, I thought that it was, okay. Mm-hmm. It's a low budget.
It's generic.
But it's I've seen far worse things than at least like the concept was interesting,
right?
But this one, even by the trailer, it looked like the effects in the TV show.
Yes,
I think were better from what I saw. And
well,
honestly,
they're sci-fi effects. They are like Sharknado type effects.
It's probably about the same, except
I couldn't put it better.
And I can't imagine that they had less of a budget when you've got Nicolas Cage on board. You had to pay the guy something.
But it seemed like honestly, I thought the original movie was like decently shot. Mm-hmm. It's okay. It's not terrible.
Well, and there's so much, even just the minutia of the plot. Like, okay, so a bunch of people disappear and go up to heaven, including, all the kids. But there was a lot of people on the airplane that stuck around that, like, they seem to be fine. Like, there's a character played by Jordan Sparks, and she loses her child on the plane. But
what have these people done?
Right, like, we didn't see her do anything. There's a little person on the plane as well who, like, was betting. And like, okay, so that's his sin. He's not going anywhere. There's a Muslim who wanted to pray, and
of course this is a Christian movie,
right? And the one guy was like, "Oh, pray to whose God?"
It's
like,
technically
dude,
the same one.
You're obviously not that religious either. You're still on the plane. so like, who are you talking to, buddy? And then the idea that like the roads were pretty much clear. Like, there were a couple car accidents and stuff, but, like, if, let's say, I don't know, 10-15% of the world gets taken up, there's going to be more crashes than, like, maybe one on this street, one here. Like, no, the streets would be just jammed.
Well, it's a matter of how many crashes could they afford.
Well, that's true. I think that's why. And also, Justin, did you notice that pretty much the hospital was still fully staffed? The fire company, really? These people don't get to go to heaven?
Wow.
They just help people their entire lives. Like, it's
no, you're terrible
so
human beings.
Stupid.
I
guess they were all atheists?
That's the only rationale we can come up for it.
So Joe, I think you've gotten more out of this 5-minute discussion about the movie than you ever would have from the film. So.
Well, if I'd seen it with you guys, I'm sure I would have enjoyed it.
All right, well, moving on, we're going to do Love is Strange now, and Joe's going to tell us about that.
Basically, it stars these two aging gentlemen. They're actually a gay couple. They're played by Alfred Molina and John Lithgow. Now, after publicly announcing their marriage as homosexuals, Molina, who teaches music at a local school, it's actually a religious institution, he's told that he has to leave because they don't approve of that. Meantime, they basically have to live off of John Lithgow's character's pension, but it's not enough, so basically Lithgow has to move in with his family. Molina basically moves in with a friendly neighbor, trying his hardest to actually find a way to get them a home, get a career, and get their lives back together. This movie is basically held up by, I think, these two great actors giving good performances, and the characters themselves, for the most part, are actually fairly believable. It seems like a very realistic situation, and that's really the best thing about the movie. The problem is that the plot itself kind of makes all these characters somewhat underdeveloped. Despite the fact that we actually spend a lot of time with them, we never really feel like they get to know them. And plus, even though these gentlemen are great actors and they actually do have some good chemistry together, it seems like they're almost so separate all the time that they're almost two completely different stories. And I think that's one reason why these characters aren't as fully fleshed out as they can be. This director, I forget who directed it. Do either of you know?
Ira Sachs.
He's kind of made a career of actually, a lot of his films are about the struggle of homosexuals coming out and having to deal with that.
I didn't recognize the name, ironically.
Well, I did a little research because I was just curious. That's actually the bulk of what his work is about, which is one reason why this one feels kind of weak, because like certain things the characters experience, like they almost seem completely shocked, like when they go to try to approach to find housing, and they're like, we're married, is that a problem? Like, then the representative's like, no, it's not. And they're almost like shocked, like, guys, this isn't, like, it just seemed like it was a little out of place. And you can tell that this is kind of what the director's been basing his films off for so long. I think they've lost some of their punch, possibly. It just felt like the story was a little underdeveloped. Like, there were a lot of different subplots. There's the art, there's the relationship with the families, but you didn't really feel like the crux of the story about their marriage, their relationship. It feels like it's lost. It's mostly hearsay. And it's because of that it's mostly underdeveloped. Still, the main story itself, what's left of it, is fairly enjoyable. The characters are okay for the most part, particularly the side ones. And, of course, you have two great performances at the helm. And I leave it with a B-.
Justin, what'd you think?
Great actors truly transform into their characters, and that's probably the best component of Love is Strange. Lithgow and Molina sell the concept of being a gay couple so well and are absolutely a joy to watch, easily stealing every scene on screen together. However, this is roughly about a quarter of the movie. For some reason, director Ira Sachs decided to focus on each more individually. And while the stories are entertaining, most notably Marisa Tomei's struggles dealing with Lithgow's antics, they just don't hold the same level of interest as when they're together. This takes the film in a couple different directions and ends on a note that just feels a bit abrupt and even a little awkward. That aside, Love is Strange is worth a look, if only for the chemistry of Lithgow and Molina, and I give it a B-.
Well, through most of this film, I was enjoying it, but it did feel a little disjointed. You both hit on this. There was just something missing. But it certainly wasn't the authenticity. The movie has this in spades. It wasn't the performances, as the three leads, which I would include Marisa Tomei in that, showcase some of their absolute best work here. But there seemed to just be a lot of missed opportunity for details, or subplots that just seemed to hang without explanation. As such, I was hovering around a C+, B- for much of the movie. Any avid fan of this show knows how I feel about conclusions. A good one can raise the film up, a poor one makes it feel like I've wasted 2 hours. I don't agree with Justin that I think the last 5 minutes of Love is Strange is absolutely perfect. It brought many of my issues with the other 90 minutes to a close, and does so in a way that highlights what's already great about the film. The authenticity of these characters. So I end Love is Strange with a slightly higher B. I think that the way it ended brought a lot of things full circle, especially with, I'm not even sure what he would be, the kid.
Yeah.
He would be like great nephew, I guess, right? Of Lithgow's character. I thought his story arc, which I felt...
That was underdeveloped, too.
It was underdeveloped the whole movie. And then at the end, we at least got some sort of substance from it.
I just wish it hadn't been so... Rushed, and then, boom, it's there.
Well, honestly, I thought the ending worked, for the most part. The problem is the transition. Like, there's literally a scene where they basically... You see the transition to the final scene of the movie and the scene before it. And it just kind of cuts away in a way that you're kind of confused what the shot is.
Right.
And then you realize what actually happened... And it just takes it a while to register. Like, it feels a little out of place. Like, it's almost like... It just felt rushed to me.
Well, I don't deny that it's a little rushed. But at the same time, I don't know that we needed much more exposition in that particular area.
I'll be honest. I felt like I understood where they were going, but the decisions the characters made did not make any sense to me at certain points.
I felt like there needed to be, like, an extra scene to build up to that,
because
to the point of the finale.
It just almost like... It almost made it implied almost to me like there's a point where the two characters separate and it leads to another action, and it seems like Molina's character almost doesn't care. And maybe it's just there was so much going on, but it just seemed like there were steps you could have taken to avoid certain things, and it just seemed like... It just didn't... like, logically speaking, it felt like it didn't make that much sense to me.
We also don't know how much time had passed.
We don't, but
between the penultimate scene and the last scene.
But that's another issue, though.
That's true. I can't deny that. I sort of...
Could have been a day, could have been a year.
I took that it was probably a month or so.
See, I literally thought it was the next day.
You thought it was the next day. Okay.
See, and that's why I was like, whoa.
Yeah, that's a little bit of an issue.
I don't know, but I think there was not much of a way to tell, necessarily.
Right. How about Tomei, though?
I really liked her. I've always liked her.
Me too.
She's good. I don't think she gets enough credit. But you're right. She was very good. I thought that you're right. Her subplot, her struggle was actually, I think, very believable, and she sold it very well.
I actually think she probably had the
fullest
arc and the most defined character.
Actually, yeah.
Because she not only has... She has 3 different things going on. She's got a relationship with her son, her husband, and John Lithgow.
4 if you count her career in the middle.
4 if you count her career. You're right. So I thought she was the most fleshed out. I would have liked to see more from the 2 male leads, obviously. But you really do, believe that they have been in this committed relationship for nearly 40 years. And I think it's shot in such a way that doesn't put it in your face, but it makes it believable.
It seems photographic, almost like almost a documentary story, like
right,
family photo sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it's very sentimental, but not overly so.
Yeah, like just kind of like when they're right after they get married, and you see them playing the piano together and stuff, and then
the party
kind of clutching onto each other's hands and stuff.
It's like the full shots of the family. You see everybody's reactions, but it seems very low key, personal. Right. But it's not like they're all these close ups of them like making out necessarily.
Yep. Yeah. I do wish we got a little bit more with the son and his friend.
Which doesn't really go anywhere.
Oh, yeah.
It's not that it doesn't go anywhere. It's just not explained all that well.
The Russian kid.
Why? Yeah, the Russian kid. Why Marissa Tomei's husband is so adamantly against this kid.
This is another thing. I feel like there's an underdiscovered issue here that's just another underdeveloped plot point. I thought that storyline was going a completely different direction, and I guess it wasn't going anywhere, and then it just went nowhere.
Yeah.
I'm just like, I thought there would have been maybe some... But the thing is, though... I think that I almost feel like the writers were going to write in this whole subplot to create more conflict, perhaps. Mm-hmm. But considering the actions of the nephew, that would have made zero sense. Right. So I'm like, why would he care? I was like, what's the problem?
Right.
And then they're like, oh, it's drugs.
Okay.
I mean, I will admit some parents might react, but I just feel like that wasn't the best way to approach it. Mm-mm. Maybe I don't know.
Yeah. Before that scene, the only thing we get is him saying, "Oh, well, he's an older boy."
Not much older.
He's not that much older.
2 years, maybe.
Yeah.
Tops.
I'd say probably 16 to 14 is the age ratio.
I thought they were the same age, honestly.
I did too. And then Marissa Tomei says, "Oh, he just looks older."
No, he doesn't.
No, he doesn't. If he looked older, you see 16-year-olds with those, half mustaches. I mean, he had no facial hair.
He could have been 14.
Yeah, he could have easily been 14. So, yes, I agree. There were a lot of wasted opportunities with this movie. But certainly the performance is not a part of that.
No.
Up next, we have our home media moment, and that is Blue Ruin. And Justin's going to talk about it.
Dwight, played by Macon Blair, has been living on a beach when he learns that Wade Cleland, the man who murdered his parents, is about to be released from prison. Though when Dwight returns to extract revenge and kill Wade, he discovers the rest of the Cleland gang is after him and prepares to defend himself from the impending attack. I have an admiration for raw, edgy action thrillers, but I also believe that there's a limit on everything. The storyline's suspenseful and intense, but at the same time fails to make too much known to the audience. It makes some of the actions of the characters feel forced, when a bit more time to flesh some, if not all of this out, would have made a wealth of difference. I understand that the filmmakers wanted a carefully contained story, but it's hard to get too absorbed into a story early on when most of the details that would draw you in are extremely minimal. While Blair does an adequate job in his homeless man turned assassin role, the rest of the cast just doesn't seem quite at home with their roles, which contributes to the semi-forced nature of the film. That said, for all its flaws, Blue Ruin does get better as it goes along, and the action remains consistently edgy, so for these reasons, I leave it with a B.
Well, I actually like this one a little bit more than that. I think the great strength of the movie is how it portrays the revenge angle, and indeed the violence as a whole. It doesn't play up the violence for gratuity's sake, nor is it understated either. It finds this perfect balance of a good, strong story and rough bloodshed. It reminded me of certain Coen Brothers films. It's a testament to the vision of the director, who I'm completely unfamiliar with, Saulnier?
Don't know.
But I'm excited to see what he brings to the table next. And for me, it was bonus points for giving a grown-up Jan Brady a gun at the end of the film. Eve Plum co-stars of the film. Blue Ruin for me gets an A-.
Oh, wow.
Joe?
Well, I think that this movie is trying to recreate kind of this really ancient revenge feud, kind of reminiscent of the Hatfields and McCoys. It's just very.
I can see it.
It's just very gritty, very very rural, but somehow it seems very close to home. When in those closed off small towns, just very reminiscent of kind of the Coen Brothers movies. It's crime, but it's low crime.
Yeah,
it's very human. It's very gritty, and it can be brutal. And I think the best thing about the movie for me was actually the violence itself. It's really intense violence, but the way they handled it, it's not glorified. Right. It's not Hollywoodized. It's not like this guy.
It was very realistic.
He's a very realistic character. He's obviously gone through a lot. You could just see this guy doing this, and the fact that he becomes the assassin, he doesn't become the big action star. He's not an ex-commando. Mm-hmm. He's just a guy that's just trying to make things right in his own mind because he's just so overcome by all this vengeance. And when he tries to commit these acts, he doesn't completely succeed. Sometimes he fumbles. It's not easy. But he kind of takes on that role, and it becomes something truly unique in that sense. I do agree, though, it's kind of hard to get super sucked into the story when we know virtually nothing. Like, we do know the main reasons for it, but the antagonists are kind of ambiguous. Like, they seem evil because of what they're doing, but then it's almost implied they're not entirely. They're just reactionary. And it makes it seem like the whole thing really is kind of pointless, but then again, I guess that could just be a commentary on the nature of vengeance in of itself. I wish we'd had a little more time to expand on some of the side characters, but overall, though, I thought the performances were actually pretty good, especially from the lead. I thought the direction was pretty succinct, and the story, though simplistic, I thought was for the most part handled well. And I thought it led to a pretty good conclusion. I'm actually in the middle of you guys. I'm going to give it a B+.
Okay, nice. You know, you bring up a good point, both of you, really, that we don't really know a lot about these people. Maybe an extra 5 or 10 minutes of exposition would have been great. But at the same time, I do think, Joe, you hit on it with the, it's a commentary about revenge itself. The Hatfields and the McCoys, there was no right or wrong. There were just two families fighting. Basically. And I think that's kind of what they were going for with this movie. I don't think necessarily there is a right or wrong. Obviously, we as the audience are supposed to get behind
one or the other.
Probably the lead, I would say.
Yes. Yeah.
Over the other family.
Because we're seeing his struggle.
Because we're seeing his side of it. But, at the same time...
It's not so black and white.
Yeah, I mean, it's not so black and white. He could have easily done maybe another 10 minutes of background with the other family and had it shown from their side and you decide.
Honestly...
why does it need to happen?
I think one thing that would have made the story stronger, though, is if we knew a little more about the lead, at least.
Yeah,
like about his transformation, where he went, how he got so bad, because it's almost like he drops off the face of the earth for 20 years, and yet everybody knows where he is.
I can't deny that,
everybody
that's true.
Kind of knows what's going on. Mm-hmm. And I mean, probably some of the strongest scenes and some of his strongest motivations are the scenes with his family. Like, he actually wants to keep them safe, and even though he wants to take revenge, he doesn't want them to be hurt by it, in physically or otherwise. And so those scenes with his sister and with his niece and nephew, like that's some of the strongest stuff. And we get so little of it.
Yeah.
If we had had even like a couple more scenes with that, just to establish her perspective, I think that it could have been a much stronger film. But we're really much just dependent on his performance and how much he brings to the table with the little knowledge that we know, which is, I think, a testament to good filmmaking. It's just that I do think some more details to flesh it out would have strengthened the film.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's definitely a ton of promise with this movie, and I like that it's so grounded, and I think you said it perfectly, Joe. It's really at its best when we have this really raw, really intense action.
But it's just so believable, though.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, you see this guy
it's never
like, I'll give you
played, just to be gruesome or just to...
Like, I want to give you the perfect example is when he gets shot by an arrow from a crossbow when he gets attacked by one of the guys. Now... He tries to do surgery on himself, and it was pretty intense.
That gave me a chill, yeah.
Some good
just thinking about it.
Good special effects
rough.
with the blood.
It was, actually, yeah.
And you see, like, this guy's really trying to not go to the police, not go to the hospital, do it himself, but he can't. He can't do it successfully, so he has to go to the hospital and leaves. It's kind of like, okay, that's believable. The average guy probably couldn't do that. He'd pass out. And, he just kind of does his thing. It briefly interrupts what's going on. Then he goes back to the revenge. It's actually kind of darkly comedic in a way. But, once again... kind of believable.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of times we get movies like The Equalizer, which we just saw last week.
Good in contrast.
It's like, the
exact opposite,
it's
actually.
The exact opposite. Denzel Washington is such a pro at life. That
he cannot be beaten.
Nothing even phases him, and it's like...
Still, like...
That's not... I mean, it's cool and it's fun and we have fun watching it,
It's its own thing. It's its own thing. It's funny, like, that he would just see this guy struggling and be like, look, dude, it's time to start over. And then Eminem would start, and then he'd just like to be a montage where they're training him and he turns into this ultimate badass.
Right.
In a whole different movie.
And Chloe Grace shows up.
Actually, you know what? That would be a good crossover. Equalizer and Blue Ruin.
The Blue Equalizer.
Or the Equal Ruin.
The Equal Ruin, yeah, that's right. I don't think you mentioned this, Justin. This also was a crowdfunded movie.
Kickstarter.
I don't know if it was Kickstarter specifically,
it was
but
Kickstarter.
It was it? Okay.
Yep.
And I think, that's cool. We've seen now a few pretty solid efforts come off a Kickstarter.
Like that's awesome, and you can tell that the budget was fairly limited. But wow, they
did a lot with it.
No names, pretty much. I don't think I knew any of the major actors.
Jan Brady's the only one I knew.
I feel like I saw.
I can't imagine they had to pay her that much money.
The lady that was his sister. I feel like I've seen her in something. I don't know anything.
She seems to have like a familiar face, but I don't think she's actually been in stuff.
Basically, amateurs, actors, but it was well done.
Yeah. Speaking of revenge, let's segue that into our top 5 this week. That is revenge movies. A lot of good ones to pick from. And Joe, we'll start with you.
Well, we'll start this off with, actually, I think I've mentioned all these before, but you might recognize the 5th one as well. It's Harry Brown. Really just the great avenging retiree movie. I mean, Michael Caine. Basically, it's actually reminiscent of kind of the same aspects we liked about Blue Ruin. It's very low, it's gritty, it's believable, it's realistic, despite the fact that you basically have this aging individual basically taking back his neighborhood. I mean, Michael Caine gives one of the best performances I've seen, and it's just so awesome to see somebody like this, basically this normal guy, taking life in their own hands just to bring their neighborhood back, and it's really awesome. It's a very, I think, a lesser-known movie. People should see it. Good revenge story. Number 4 is, of course, one of the great Scorsese's. It's Gangs of New York.
I figured that would be on there.
Classic Leo trying to get revenge for, Liam Neeson. I mean, you got... What you going to say right there when you're trying to avenge Liam Neeson? But just a...
Great villain.
Great villain. You got your Daniel Day-Lewis. I mean, just some of the best costume work I've ever seen. Great sets. Just a really awesome, epic story. Really very original in a lot of ways. A big part of American history people don't know about, but really good revenge tale. Number 3, I don't think I'm cheating here, but I'm limited to one Tarantino, according to Justin.
Justin said we can only do one Tarantino, which is fair.
Which is fair. So if I had to pick one, it would be Kill Bill, Volume 1 and 2. It's technically one movie.
That's fair, I'll allow it.
So, Kill Bill, probably, it changes, honestly, but it's probably my favorite Tarantino film. I just love Uma Thurman in this. I love all the actors. It's just kind of a great homage to old samurai revenge tales and westerns and anime and a lot of things that I like. Some of the best of Tarantino's work. A lot of fun. Number 2 is one I should definitely run some time. It's Count of Monte Cristo, 2002. I mean, it doesn't get much better than just another retelling of one of the great classic revenge tales in Western literature, or French literature, I guess.
There you go.
But, Western world literature. It's my favorite performance from Jim Caviezel. And Guy Pearce, too, is a great villain, actually. Just a really good story. Usually is, and just a really great movie. I don't think it gets quite as much props as it should, but it's definitely one that I think stands out. Great historical epic in a lot of ways, and rather enjoyable.
Nice. A few for me to check out on that list.
Yeah, I think you...
I've only seen one.
I've only seen Kill Bill, right?
Yeah, but you got it. All right, well, I will go next. I do have one honorable mention. It's not really a revenge movie. It's more of a romance, one might say. But that is Ghost.
Actually, that came up on some lists.
I mean, Patrick Swayze does get murdered at the beginning, and most of the movie really is about him
getting revenge,
trying to avenge his death through Whoopi Goldberg.
Aidan Quinn, right?
Tony somebody. I forget. Tony...
Is it the Scandal guy?
Yeah, but the president on Scandal.
Well, he hasn't aged at all.
No, he looks exactly the same as in Ghost. It was 25 years ago, almost. But anyway, so I had to throw it in there. It's my favorite of all of the movies I'm going to mention, but not really that revengey. But my number 5 is The Brave One. This is a great Jodie Foster movie. I can't remember if I put it on my top 5 Foster performances or not when we did that list.
I wanted to see it. I never did.
Oh, I'll loan it to you. It's great. Neil Jordan directed this, who did one of my other favorites, The Crying Game. One of the few Terrence Howard performances that I like. But
shocking.
She is, I know. It really is. This is before I hated him, though.
Okay.
Because it's a while ago. But no, I mean, I always like a real good story with a female vigilante. Colombiana was on my short list as well for this list. My number 4 is Sleepers. Very
classic.
Dark, frightening movie almost, really. When
great cast,
it comes down. Yeah, great cast. And I saw this when it first came out, so for me it was my first exposure to a lot of these people. And just a really, really great revenge story. Number 3 is one of the all-time classics of anything, and that is Hamlet. The 1990 Mel Gibson version. I've never seen the Kenneth Branagh version.
You should.
That's what I hear.
Actually,
and I understand it's the first or possibly only ever that took the entire Hamlet unabridged and put it to film.
I think that's accurate.
Yeah, I think so.
Actually, Justin, have you ever seen the Ethan Hawke one?
No.
Because I think that's one you should check out too, the modern one, like Romeo and Juliet.
Oh, okay.
It's not.
I didn't know that existed, but
I've heard it's pretty loved or hated, though.
I think it's worth checking out.
I mean, it's hard to go wrong with the basic story of Hamlet, so
Yeah.
I can't imagine they've screwed it up that much, and I do like Ethan Hawke. But no, the Mel Gibson version was great. I actually ended up watching it because it first came on video when I was a freshman in high school, and we had to watch it for an English assignment and compare it to the play. Glenn Close, another great performance for her. My number 2 is Taken. This movie, I think, blew everybody away when it came out. Liam Neeson himself has said he thought it was going to go direct-to-video. His career was kind of not really on fire at the time.
He was about to go direct to video.
He was about to go direct to video, and then he comes out with this movie. It just blew everybody away. It's so great, and really, it's possibly the greatest all-time, revenge movie line of "I've got a particular set of skills."
That is pretty good.
I mean, that has come into our lexicon now. So that is my number 2. Justin.
And then there was Taken 2.
And then there was Taken 2,
and
which is horrible, and then Taken 3, The Future, yes.
I forgot about that, but yeah, that's a good choice, Dan.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I will also have an honorable mention, and that is Sergio Leone's Once Upon a Time in the West. The main reason this is an honorable mention, not necessarily on my list, is because it takes a long time to actually figure out who is exactly exacting revenge. But once it shows up, it's absolutely epic. It has probably one of the best last 30 minutes of a movie ever in cinematic history. But to get to my list, number 5, Steven Spielberg's Munich. I think it's a very seldom discussed but very good movie. It's a true story that really makes one realize how good somebody had to be at getting payback well before the digital age. My number 4 is Enter the Dragon. Say what needs to be said about Bruce Lee's acting, but this is one of the most influential action films of its time. Simply put, he's getting payback for his sister's death, and does so in some of the most exciting and trippy action sequences ever. And it may be a bit campy, but by today's standards, the final fight might be one of the best in martial arts history.
Yeah.
My number 3, I'm sure Joe will very much appreciate,
Probably.
and it is Old Boy, the
Which
Korean
one?
version.
Okay.
Wow.
Like there was even a question.
No love for Brolin.
Not this time.
Well, let's not go there. There are few films in this day and age that can get me on the edge of my seat. This film did so less than a minute into the film. It has near constant suspense with its bizarre scenarios and even occasional dark humor, which is something I really wanted Spike Lee to capitalize on with the Americanized version. Unfortunately, I do think the ending goes in a bit of a odd, sometimes surreal direction that I'm not entirely sure how to feel about. I was divisive about it then, I'm still divisive about it now. Though I will admit I do think I probably need a second viewing on it. And my number 2, Inglourious Bastards. It may look and feel like a Brad Pitt movie, but in reality it's a story about an orphan Jewish girl's quest for vengeance, and it's all the better for it.
That's also a Brad Pitt movie.
Gets revenge on such a grand scale that it literally rewrites World War II's ending, and it completely works. The revenge story is just so satisfying that it still serves as my second favorite Tarantino film.
All right, Joe, your number 1 is...
Well,
What a shock.
oh boy.
There it is.
The original one.
Of course.
Well, I mean, favorite movie of all time, and it happens to be one of the best revenge movies ever made. Just really, I mean, Justin said it best. Just some great suspense, really awesome characters, just some great fights. Also, really kind of sort of unchoreographed in a way. Probably one of the best villains in cinema history ever. Really, he's just a scary guy. Admittedly, the ending is a bit weird, but I actually think it does work. It's definitely very thought-provoking. Just really good movie, really good performances, very well done. And the mystery's good, the twist is good, and it's a great revenge film.
Nice.
What can I say?
All right, well, my number 1 is of the one Tarantino movie rule. I would say most Tarantino movies would be number 1 on this list. They're above pretty much all the other ones I've mentioned. But which one do you think I went with?
Does get more revengey for him than Kill Bill.
Is it Django?
It is Kill Bill.
Oh, yeah.
If we're talking about movies on the whole, I don't know if this would be in the lead, but if we're going to talk revenge, Kill Bill is absolutely the way to go. Inglourious Basterds, obviously, good choice, Justin. Django, amazing movie. Pulp Fiction, only minorly about revenge. But Kill Bill 1 and 2 is just, it's such an epic revenge tale. Played out beautifully, shot beautifully, great music, of course. It's Tarantino. So that is my number 1. Justin?
One note about that on both your counts, since you both had it on your list. Kill Bill narrowly missed mine because I was waiting for the actual completed 4-hour cut that theoretically is someday going to come out. So I didn't think it was really fair to
jump the gun.
Jump the gun. Just look at 1 and 2 individually.
Well, they're one movie, Justin. Everybody knows
they're
that.
one movie.
They are, but still,
I understand.
That was the main reason.
I got you.
But my number 1, I don't think either of you have seen, and that is Fritz Lang's M.
No.
The director may have lit up the cinematic world with Metropolis, a genre-defining sci-fi feature, but this is almost as good. He presents us with a villain so vicious, so cruel, that even the scum of the city is working with the townspeople to hunt him down. And yet, he still manages to pose a question of whether or not vengeance will ever be fully sated. And it's for that reason that Lang is easily in my top 10 filmmakers of all time.
Okay.
Yeah, I definitely have not seen that.
Classic.
Yeah, cool. All right, well, that's going to bring us to our triple feature of older films, and we start this week with really another revenge tale, and that is Looper, new classic of the week, and Joe's going to tell us about it.
That's right. Well, Looper is a 2012 science fiction action thriller film, and I guess also revenge film, written and directed by Rian Johnson, and starring Bruce Willis, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, and Emily Blunt. Before Live, Die, Repeat. In the film, time travel is invented by the year 2074, although it is apparently outlawed, as well as murder, being virtually impossible to commit anymore, and is used by criminal organizations to send those they want killed into the past, where they are killed by loopers, who are essentially assassins paid by silver bars that are strapped to the bodies of their targets when they send them back. Joe, played by Joseph Gordon-Levitt, is a looper, and encounters himself when his older self is sent back in time to be killed to close his own loop and end the contract. He learns that the older Joe plans to kill a new crime boss called the Rainmaker, who is responsible for killing his wife in the future. The best thing about Looper is the originality of the plot. Time travel isn't easy to pull off, though this one does create a few plot holes. I mean, it's inevitable. This concept of time-traveling hitman is pretty darn cool, with a really unique spin. Much like Johnson's other work, the cinematography here is so sharp and gritty. The editing is smooth as well, creating an atmosphere so reminiscent of noir. Willis, Blunt, and Levitt give great performances, and the effects work in the mostly low-key but very effective scale. I must really commend the makeup work on Levitt too, who looks so very much like a young Willis it was almost unrecognizable the first time I saw the film. However, despite all of the great performances and the technical aspects, and the surrounding by interesting ideas that shroud the film, the biggest issue I have is that these ideas kind of take a backseat to the mystery that we get in the second act. The characters also seem somehow a little underdeveloped to me, despite all the information we actually receive about them. They're mostly held up by really good performances. I like the world too, but I just felt like we didn't get enough of it. Still, it is held up by the style in these performances and that originality, and I give it a B+.
Okay. Well, Rian Johnson is a director who believes in telling interesting stories. Though I thought Brick, which Justin ran for Old Classic a few months ago, had a lot of problems, it's hard to deny that he was trying to tell an interesting yarn with it. Visually, Looper hits the mark on every level. And Joe, you mentioned this. Getting the audience to believe that Joseph Gordon-Levitt, who looks zero like Bruce Willis, is the same person just 25 years or so younger, shows how much detail has gone into this movie. The sequences on Emily Blunt's farm and with her child highlight the strength in the storytelling and are also visually appealing. And for a time travel movie, Joe, you also said this, there's very little in the way of plot holes. There's some, you're always going to have some, but I think it's pretty impressive that this one stays together pretty well. Looper is clever, fun, well-acted, intelligent, and was part of my top 10 for 2012. Looper is an A. Justin?
If there is a film I almost immediately compare to Looper, it will be Blade Runner. The first viewing leaves a bit of an interesting impression, but upon subsequent viewings, the more it can be appreciated. While it's uncertain Looper will go through as many alternate cuts as Blade Runner has, a second viewing definitely makes an impression. notably in context with how the rest of the film plays out. Although I have my issues with the story seeming to alter the focus a bit with a concept that seems relatively out of place, I have a great deal of admiration for the clever editing choices from director Rian Johnson, who never ceases to impress. Although Gordon-Levitt or Willis's characters are far from likable protagonists, they still feel fully fleshed out, and with some smart filmmaking choices, offer up a wealth of details in only a few minutes, particularly in how Gordon-Levitt evolves into Willis. That said, the start of the finale still comes off as a bit odd, and the ending has more than a few unanswered questions, but Looper's one of the more thought-provoking science fiction pieces I've seen in recent years, and I bumped my grade up to an A-.
From the original B+, I believe.
That is correct.
And great Jeff Daniels performance.
As Abe, the mob boss.
Yeah.
Yep.
You don't see him scary too often.
No, he usually isn't a bad guy.
No, he's usually fun-loving and...
He's the nice guy you hang
right.
out with, you know. I'm guessing you were surprised by my grade?
Yeah, I'm actually surprised it was that low. Now, you'd seen this movie before, right? Okay.
This is my second viewing.
Okay.
Okay.
Higher or lower than on the first watch?
A little higher.
Okay.
Yeah, it's one of those films that had a lot of hype around it, of course, and I was interested. But I think my biggest problem with the movie is kind of what Justin pointed out. It's just like there's a massive shift in what the movie's about. See, I really like the world. I like the future. I like the weird crime stuff and the time travel with the loopers and the missions. And I felt like there was a lot of interesting wealth there. And that's the hook of the movie. It's called Looper.
Right.
But the actual story is more of the mystery and revenge about, trying to find the Rainmaker. And then there's the whole telekinetic thing, which just feels off to me. It feels like two separate movies that were kind of combined. The stuff on the farm with Emily Blunt just feels like it takes you out of what I really wanted to see in the first place.
Okay.
And as it continues to go on, I'm just like, it feels like we've gone to a completely different area.
I can definitely agree with that. And just knowing our different styles, I guess, I can totally see how you would have wanted it to stay in the Looper future and sort of build on that world.
Like, don't get me wrong, the mystery of the Rainmaker is really awesome. And I liked what they did with the story, the philosophical and ethical ideas. I mean, I get it. I understand why it's important. But I just feel like you could have had a whole nother movie about that with that particular style. It's just so massively conflicting.
Yeah.
It seems a little bit like misadvertising almost.
Okay.
Like, I wanted to see the loopers.
Right.
Not this one looper that kind of goes off and does his own thing. And
yeah, you're right. In the trailer, we saw very little about
the farm.
If anything, about the farm, Emily Blunt, her kid.
Which takes up the latter half of the film.
It's half the movie for sure.
Literally by like the second act, it's basically that. And really, I'd say you might have a third, which is actually what people really thought was so cool about it in the first place. Which I guess is fine, but if I had a choice, I would have probably spent a little more time with that particular area and a little bit more detail about the loopers and how the organization worked. And like I said, the biggest plot hole in the movie, how the whole actually looping works with closing the contract and getting in contact with people in the past. Like, that's pretty fascinating.
So you wanted to see more with that?
A little more. Like, that's mostly background. And then how do we solve this? We defeat the bad guys in literally 2 minutes and just, resolve that plot point. And then we go back to this and it's like,
doesn't really feel.
I'm like, oh
like
yeah,
it's
and I'm supposed
coherent,
to, and then we're supposed to root for this character and feel bad for this character.
Yeah,
I'm not going to spoil anything, but
true.
I'm sorry, I couldn't really get behind it. I mean, Akira was more likable. We were joking about it, and I never seen it, damn. But
No.
but it's like, no, I guess that shift I just didn't like.
Well, I will say though, I think probably the main quote unquote hook of at least the marketing was that Gordon-Levitt and Willis were the same character.
Yes.
Yes, they talked about the loopers in the preview, obviously, but I think they really played up that angle, which is constant throughout the film.
Once again,
so
of course, my favorite part of the movie is the development of Joseph Gordon-Levitt into Bruce Willis and his whole character growth, which we get in a montage, and then we just get to see him in little sequences here and there doing his own thing, having the most interesting part of the story, in my opinion, literally in a couple little segments.
I would have liked them to see them together more.
I mean,
that's for sure. And then the scene at the diner was great.
It's awesome, yeah.
And I mean, there are points where they interact and you feel like they're just so separate because there are two different men set on different paths that as the movie goes on, it's hard to believe Joseph Gordon-Levitt actually becomes him because he doesn't have the same desires. I know he hasn't changed, but more interaction with them a little more balance with that storyline with Bruce Willis in, I think would have strengthened the movie, at least from my perspective.
I can agree with that.
I just feel like there were a couple side stories they shoved in there that they really wanted to tell, and they just kind of used the first half to get you there.
Okay.
But they could have easily taken the whole Paul Dano subplot and tried to implement it a little bit with Justice Gordon-Levitt.
Yeah, that's another example, too. That seemed like, once again, a little more about the Loopers and that whole area. It feels almost like a side thing that's a prelude rather than something that could be integrated better. Feels like, once again, another side story that they just kind of put in there.
Okay.
So,
Though, one thing I would like to make note of, though, that I thought was really interesting, part of the reason I gave it an A-, the whole Looper bit, for as brief as it is, it never feels repetitive, which I think is really impressive.
Well, that's because they don't use it that much.
Yeah, they don't spend that much time on it, so I don't think that's that surprising.
A little bit. I mean,
a little bit.
I'd say, like, in the first third, they do that a lot.
But it was certainly very interesting. I mean, I can't deny that, yes, Joe, I would like to see more about the Loopers world and about the future.
Like, for instance, what if they had actually said, okay, I'm going to send you back to kill you now. He actually talks to them, they get to know each other. This is what happens. Maybe he decides to help him, or maybe they decide to team up, or maybe they just have more conflict trying to stop each other more directly instead of just spending so much time with Emily Blunt on the farm instead of being more proactive. You know what I'm saying?
Maybe I just love Emily Blunt so much. That could be...
She does do a very good job.
I mean, she's amazing in this movie.
All right, look,
but...
I'll be honest, she did a good job.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's badly done, but you could have taken that whole section...
You wanted her to get out of there. I gotcha.
That whole part of the movie could have been removed, and the movie could have still been very good.
Okay.
I'm just saying, there were alternatives here.
Yeah. All right, well, up next is our old classic, and that was my pick. We're doing Horror Month for, of course, Halloween. And my pick is The Blair Witch Project. In it, 3 young adults, Heather, Mike, and Josh, played by people of the same name, plan on making a film about the infamous Blair Witch, a supposedly urban legend in Maryland who lives deep in the woods and murders people. They start by interviewing townspeople about the witch, and then head out into the woods themselves to see what they can find. Soon, what they find is that they are utterly lost, and over the course of a few days, things start getting more and more creepy, and the trio turns on each other, and they fear they may die in those woods. The Blair Witch Project is one of the absolute scariest films, to me, ever made, and one of the most brilliant, partially due to an unprecedented marketing campaign. The film is largely regarded as the first ever movie to become a hit because of the internet. Not only were fans of early screenings talking about it online, but the studio set up a website with fake news stories and created a buzz around this being real found footage, these kids being real people who disappeared. When I saw the movie in theaters in 1998, it was largely thought that it was a fictitious story, but there was still some doubt. Did this actually happen? It added to the intensity tenfold, but I have to say, even watching it this week for the second time, more than 15 years after learning the truth about the film, it is still one of the most bone-chilling horror films I have ever seen, far beyond just its terrifying ending. With all the information so easily accessible on the internet now and in the future, we may never be able to get a marketing campaign as brilliant as this one, but the film stands as a testament to a time when people were not sure what to believe, and for me it gets an A. Justin?
It's hard to say whether or not the reputation the Blair Witch Project has had over all this time has been tarnished in an age where POV found footage films oversaturate the horror market. Though it wasn't the first horror film to take this route, the Blair Witch Project has still created a lasting legacy. While I've never been as terrified as some with this film, I have to give credit to the creepy atmosphere that the cheap cameras provide. Even though the interviews with outside sources only take up a few moments in the first act, it still helps emphasize the eerie nature this film offers up. It may not be as appreciated amongst new fans of horror, but the Blair Witch Project still serves as a landmark in cinematic filmmaking with a lasting impression, and I give it an A-.
Joe, what'd you think?
Really, you guys hit the nail on the head here. Just in terms of just the... I mean, I think that this one really is a testament to great filmmaking.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it kind of is one of the best examples to me of how much you can do with so little. All you got to do is just have, some creative timing, a good idea, and a lot of heart, and you can make a decent movie. Really, and once again, it does help. I think that it just kind of was one of the big forefronts for the found footage genre, basically started it for modern horror, considering the fact that these actors were basically novices, as writers and directors all together. They worked together really well, and they actually managed to serve their limited technical elements to their advantage. And they just create a really good atmosphere, and they just kind of allow the viewer to take in their own imagination as to what they cannot see. It does work. It's a good old trick, but it's been utilized before in mediums outside film as well as within it. And this one's just really well done. I mean, you can't really get past how creepy it is, despite the fact there's very little there to actually go on. It's really not that manipulative, surprisingly. It's much more naturalistic. Overall, though, I mean, really, I don't have that many problems with it. I do think that there is an element of corniness after so many years.
There's been a lot of parodies.
You associate the gags and the parodies over time. And, I mean, you could make fun of some of the stereotypes and cliches also because there have been so many films like it that have copied off this one. But still, you can't deny that it's a very well-made movie. And I also give it an A-.
Well, yeah, Justin, I do have to speak to your not being so terrified as some. I mean, that's because you saw it long after it had come out, and everybody knew it was fake, and you didn't see it on a big screen, and believe me, it was horrifying. And Joe, you also said that after you had seen it originally, and you didn't see it on the big screen either, but it got to you.
The movie had an impact on me the first time I watched it. Like, I watched it by myself in the dark because I didn't think it would be that scary. And as I've told you, like, when I went out camping, literally, like, I think a couple days later, I got a little freaked out. I was like, because I kept thinking, wow, like, I just kept thinking about the Blair Witch, couldn't get it out of my head. And it was a very, very well done movie. I mean, if very few horror movies actually scare me like that. And the fact that it was actually more subtle, how do you get credit for that?
Yeah.
Usually the monsters don't scare me that much.
And I think that is why you said it in your review that, it's a lot of imagination with this movie. You don't have any jump scares. You don't really have even any loud noises.
Not really.
Really. I mean, maybe a scream here or there from the distance, once one of the members of the team goes off.
But it makes it feel like you're actually there.
But it makes it puts you right in the middle of that campground. And the fact that, as, their characters are supposed to be these novice filmmakers anyway.
It works.
It works because, you are seeing what they see through the camera. We never see anything that they don't see. And a lot of times, you hear something, obviously you're not going to be focused right on it with your camera. You hear something from the background, then you turn to look, there's nothing there. So is it all in your mind? Did you think you heard or saw what you saw? Whatever.
It's tricky.
It is tricky, and I think that's what makes it such a frightening premise, really. And I would say the first Paranormal Activity also had a good internet grounds roots campaign. It was also made on no budget and found footage, but back in the infancy of internet, this was just such a revelation. Now you could go on Wiki and say, okay, or Snopes and say, oh yeah, okay, that's fake. There is no Blair Witch. These people aren't real. But at the time it was very innovative and scary to a lot of people.
Yeah.
So glad we got to watch that again. I wasn't sure if I ever wanted to see that again, to be honest, but I thought it might be a good pick for Horror Month.
Yeah.
All right, well, finally we have Angels Over Broadway. That is our Oscar A to Z film. It was a 1940 film nominated for Original Screenplay, and Justin's got that one.
Charles Angle, played by John Quaylen, is in a bit of trouble. He's been caught embezzling and is moments away from leaving this world completely. However, when his suicide note is discovered by Gene Gibbons, played by Thomas Mitchell, he promises Angle to save his life with a little help from hustler Bill O'Brien, played by Douglas Fairbanks Jr., and his companion Nina Barona, played by Rita Hayworth. About midway through this film, I joked to Joe that this was playing out in a strange combination of It's a Wonderful Life and The Godfather. And the further it went on, the more frighteningly accurate that statement actually became. Both are great films, but do they work as well together as they do separately? Sort of. While there's no denying the infectious charisma of Fairbanks and Mitchell, the storyline goes in more than a couple odd directions. It jumps from upbeat comedy to self-loathing in a matter of seconds for a film under 80 minutes, and the shift really does suffer from it. Fortunately, the Capra-esque moments definitely seem to restore faith in humanity, in regards to how far would a person be willing to go for someone they barely know, until the ending, that seems to have relatively strong footing, before diving face first into Hollywood melodrama. It's far from my favorite piece on our Oscar journeys, but for the performances and a mostly entertaining storyline, I give it a B-.
Far from my favorite of the Oscar. I would hope it's nowhere near. We've seen now, about 60 of these?
It's a lot.
Probably a little more. But Joe, what'd you think of Angels Over Broadway?
Actually, it's funny, that statement does have some resonance. It's kind of surprisingly accurate. I don't think they jive well, honestly. I think tonally, this movie is all over the place. Plot-wise, it's all over the place. The characters are interesting, though. They're fun, and the actors give good performances. I think that everybody had good chemistry. But I felt like we were switching our perspective and our goal in the plot like maybe 4 or 5 times in the movie. And it moves so fast because the movie's so short, you feel like you really haven't had anything that's fully developed, unfortunately. I mean, it does have some more momentum as it goes along, and I guess it was entertaining. I do agree with Justin there. But really, it's just so disorganized and all over the place. And the ending is just forced, and I'll be honest, even by the standards of the 40s, stupid. I thought that this was even a better quality movie than that. I'm actually going to leave it with a B- as well. I thought that it was enjoyable, and also the performances were good. There were some interesting characters, potential for a really good movie here, but just really disorganized, and that ending was just so melodramatic. And just completely out of nowhere.
Yeah, it has a lot of the early Hollywood conventions, shoehorning in that romance that not only doesn't need to be there, but the Fairbanks character is so unlikable that it's in no way even satisfying that he gets the girl.
It doesn't make sense.
That's the ending that Joe is referring to. It's terrible. And the overly drunken but lovable man as the comic relief character, another Hollywood classic. None of that stuff really works here, and it's done worse than in many other films in the day. But anything with that Angels character, from the suicide plot to trying to hustle the poker players, that is where the film shines. That's the good stuff here, that people enjoy seeing. So I'm with you guys. I gave Angels Over Broadway a B- as well. A lot of things that don't work, a few that do and are done very well. But you're both right. It's so short that it just kind of flies from plot to plot, and you sort of lose yourself in what they're even doing, or who's trying to help what, or,
Because they changed their hustle a couple times, too.
Yeah, once they got to the poker table, I was a little confused as to okay, wait, when did we decide on that hustle?
The original plan wasn't to do that. They were going to try and get something over at the boss, but then they decided, hey, we know these guys that are holding this game.
Let's do this instead.
Because our plan A didn't work, I guess.
It's like if American Hustle, they, instead of the art, they halfway through the movie were like, let's not do fake art. Let's do bootleg DVDs instead.
That'll work.
It's like, wait, we were already doing something. So, I don't know. I'm not sorry that we watched it, but it's certainly not among the best. That's clear to say, I think.
It's no Adam's Rib.
No, Adam's Rib. That's one of my favorites.
Yep.
All right. Well, I guess that's going to do it for the show this week then. We will have another old classic horror movie next week. That's going to be Joe's pick, and then it's time for Listener's Choice. So if you do have a suggestion for our Listener's Choice for Horror Month for the old classic, let us know about that. And there's several ways you can do that. And just to get in touch with us in general, you've got the Twitter feed, which is @FilmFanaticsPod, our Facebook group up and running, which is Film Fanatics with an exclamation point. And, of course, you can comment on this YouTube page right now. And as well, if you're not a subscriber already, go ahead and subscribe up for that. Joe, you have the Merlin page going on. Anything new there?
The most recent thing I did was episodes 1 and 2 of Gotham.
Oh, yes. A very lively discussion about the TV show Gotham.
It's quite lively.
Yes, very true. All right. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you back here next week. Rayford Steele's got to get paid.